But we know that the political and economic experiment that was Liz Truss's premiership has now come to an end, and the Tory party are looking for a new leader once again. It's looking potentially like a two-horse race between former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, with both reportedly securing the 100 MP backers they need. But is the country ready for Boris 2.0? Let's speak now to Lincoln MP Karl McCartney, who is backing Boris all the way. Good evening, Karl.
Good evening, Mark, and good evening to Laura, Emma, and also to Tommy and all your audience.
Well, thank you. Great to have you on the programme. I believe it's your first appearance, first of many, I've got no doubt. Mr McCartney, why Boris Johnson and not Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt?
Because I think Boris Johnson proved himself before the 2019 general election as Prime Minister. He led the party into that general election as a Prime Minister and secured the best result for the Conservative Party for many a year, with a huge majority of members of Parliament as well. And we've still got just over 2 years of that 5-year parliamentary term, and we live in a parliamentary democracy. And it's up to the Conservative Party to choose the best leader for the Conservative Party. And I personally believe, as do many of my colleagues, and actually so many of my constituents in Lincoln, firmly believe that that person is Boris.
Is Boris Johnson, do you think, to the prized figure of 100 Tory MPs? We're hearing noises from Boris supporters that he's hit the century, but what do you know?
I'm very confident that Boris Johnson has hit that 100 and actually is over the 100. So I think there's various, should we call them commentators, and maybe some of Rishi's supporters who are trying to denigrate that information. But the fact is, we will see on Monday, won't we, by 2 o'clock, because the nomination papers have to be in. And the nomination papers need to have 100 or 100 plus Conservative members of Parliament's names on there with their accompanying qualifications. So I'm quite confident, as I'm told the Boris Johnson campaign is, that he's over that threshold and actually seeking to have even more of his fellow Conservative members of Parliament sign his nomination papers and put him forward to be the leader of our party.
Do you anticipate that he will officially declare his participation in this contest tomorrow?
I don't know, because I've not actually spoken to him personally, so I'm sure he's discussing that with some of his close lieutenants, but we will wait and see and find out, won't we? So it'll be either then or Monday, obviously, once the nomination papers are in and he's confirmed as a candidate. It's a very fast-paced and will be very fast-moving from there on in. Because once the nomination papers are, and the close of nominations is at 2 o'clock on Monday, the hustings is at 2:30, and then I think the voting starts at 3 or 3:30. So it's all going to be quite fast moving on Monday afternoon.
However, Mr McCartney, do you think that if Boris Johnson becomes Prime Minister, that his appearance before the Privileges Committee into whether he misled Parliament or lied to Parliament could derail his premiership just weeks into his return to number 10?
No, I think there's all sorts of things that got thrown at Boris Johnson as Prime Minister by the Labour Party and some in the mainstream media. They did it for, getting on for 9 months. They were hoping that some mud would stick. And eventually any individual, once you take a battering, eventually perhaps you think, actually, it's not going to stop. And so you take a decision that you need to remove yourself from the fray and perhaps get away and lick your wounds and do some healing. And that was a decision that he made and he took. But I think there was the phrase buyer's remorse has been used quite a lot. And I think some of those amongst my colleagues who were instrumental in putting the pressure on him to do that immediately saw the error of their ways. And actually, I've spent the summer in my constituency, as I would as a marginal seat member of Parliament, where so many of my constituents, whether they are in business, whether I'm filling up my car at the petrol station, shopping at various different supermarkets, and exactly the same today. Wherever I went today, people were crossing the street to tell me, bring back Boris. I've never had anybody come and tell me that they're really pleased that some of my colleagues, perhaps on the wetter side of the Conservative Party, were right to have got rid of Boris. And actually, nobody's come up to me to tell me that they want Rishi Sunak to be the leader of our party. However, whoever wins, we as a Conservative Party, whichever side of the Conservative Party, and we are a broad church. You've obviously earlier on been discussing a tweet now subsequently deleted by my colleague Tobias Elwood. We are a broad church, always have been, but we all need to row in and get back in line and show some discipline as we move forward for the sake of the country in the immediate future. But obviously, as we progress towards the next general election, which could be, as late as December 24. But that's something that we as a Conservative Party and Conservative members of Parliament need to get a grip of.
It's my guess, Karl McCartney, my instinct, my judgment, having, read this at length in terms of what may pan out next week, that, and I think most political commentators take the view that if it goes to the membership, if it's Sunak versus Johnson, then your man is home and hosed. So it's all about receiving the support of 100 MPs. And I think it's just a matter of time before he becomes Prime Minister. If Boris does get the top job, Karl McCartney, how do you solve a problem like Rishi Sunak?
Well, I don't think it's a problem. I think, as I said, I hope that Boris Johnson is going to win this leadership contest and come back and be our Prime Minister. But if it's Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt, who seem to be the three names that most people are talking about on Monday, and it can only be three candidates that get through to the final because the bar's been 22 exec of 100 Conservative MPs having to nominate a candidate. I think whoever wins, they need to have the most talented people in government. And unfortunately, it's always been perceived politics as, it can be a bit of a chumocracy. And actually, sometimes, we'd all like it to be a meritocracy. That's perhaps a utopia that we won't ever achieve. But actually, at this point in time, with where the country is and where, the international stage is, I think it's desperate that actually the right people, round pegs are in round holes, and actually the most talented amongst us are brought into the tent, so to speak. And there's 360 or 350 odd MPs that Conservative members of Parliament that can help and want to serve, and I would hope every single one of them would want, if asked by whoever leads our party after the leadership election next week, to do their very best for the country. And for the party to ensure, as we move forward to the next general election, we're in the best place to fare well when that election is called.
Karl McCartney, you're saying all the right things. I thought you were about to break in.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. I'll give you a fiver later.
Definitely. Look, I think you're absolutely right that the party must unite and move on, whoever becomes Prime Minister. That's only possible if Rishi Sunak enters the tent, if he comes into that broad church of Boris Johnson's premiership. It's very important, isn't it? Last night on the programme, I suggested in my Big Opinion monologue a possible dream team of Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak working together in the national interest. That would unite the party. It would be reassuring to the international bond market and possibly could help the Tories win the next general election. Boris Johnson's got to give a job to Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak has got to say yes. And if that doesn't happen, your party remains horribly split.
Well, we could all, the hypotheticals. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who's talking to who. You haven't mentioned other names there. You could say that Penny Mordaunt has performed very well in the various roles that she's had. She wouldn't be being talked about and wouldn't have put her name forward and have a number of my colleagues who've already said that they're going to nominate her if she wasn't a good politician. Good at the roles that she's done, and I gratefully, I'm grateful that she's there. She's somebody that I respect. I've seen her operating, whether that's at the dispatch box or in her department or amongst colleagues, and I very often have breakfast along with a number of others at 7:30 in the members' tea room with her. So I know Penny very well, but I'd hope that she would be in the mix as well as lots of other of my colleagues, some of those who perhaps have been in cabinet, some of those perhaps who have only been junior ministers in the past, or perhaps haven't yet served in a government role. But I would just want the best people to be brought in and to make sure that this country gets on, or we as a government get on with governing the country to the best of our abilities, because that's what the people want. That's why my constituents, the vast majority of them, and those right across the country of my colleagues, are saying bring back Boris.
Karl McCartney, thank you so much. Upon that, we can all agree. Thank you so much for your time. Do join us again soon.